Amazing. So I'd love to just kind of say hi, Jacqueline and Georgie. Do you want to give everyone a wave, let everyone know where you're at?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Jacqueline. Cool. Awesome. So I will take a few minutes as we're letting people roll in. If y'all haven't heard of Farmers Footprint before, if this is your first time joining us, we are a coalition of farmers, educators, doctors, scientists, and business leaders, really focused on, exposing the human and environmental impacts of chemical farming and offering a path forward through regenerative agriculture practices. And we do that in two main ways, in storytelling and community. So this is such a beautiful intersection of both of those theories of change for us. Georgie is a part of the team that coordinates these beautifully story-told moments around farmers throughout the world and the US. And I think a really potent example of what's possible with that is that, you as potentially not a land steward can get a little bit closer to this movement and see what it's like to be a farmer. And through the Meet a Farmer storytelling series, that's one beautiful way that it happens. And these Farmside Chats also, I think, are such a powerful moment to actually get a chance to chat with farmers and land stewards. So Jacqueline, it's a huge pleasure to have you here with us. I know that you are a shepherdess and the founder of a company and a mom, and there is so many directions that your time is being pulled in all of the different ways. And yeah, it's just a pleasure that you took some time and wanted to jump in with this community. So thank you so much.
I'm very honored to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Kate, I think we can pull down the intro screen so we can see everyone who's in this space together. That'd be amazing. Awesome, guys. Good to see everyone. Amazing. So today we are gonna have a few moments of gratitude. So thank you also to every person who is here today and those who are still arriving. What's going on, Derek? I think there's huge power in just listening to these stories and popping in and having a moment. So thank you to each of you for spending some of your time with us as well. And if you've been to these before, you know the flow, but we are going to jump in. Georgie is really intimately familiar with Jacqueline's story. And so she's going to kind of help bridge the arc of Jacqueline's work. And then we'll transition to questions and answers with you all. So we are, since we're kind of an intimate group today, really excited to give everyone the chance to, ask questions directly. So after we transition to questions and answers, feel free to click participants and then raise your hands to ask a question to Jacqueline, or also feel free to share a question in the chat. The only thing that we do ask is just some friendly guardrails around the questions. So you'll have max 90 seconds to ask your question to Jacqueline. And then if you go over time, I'll toss this really cute little confetti emoji at you just so we have some awesome ability to make sure everyone gets to answer their questions. So, and then also I would say just as a best practice, if you'd like to pin Jacqueline's screen, so if you navigate to the 3 dots on the top right of her screen, there's a little notification that you can click pin. So she'll be kind of like speaker view for you, and that'll give you a nice experience during this. Amazing. So as a really brief intro, I know, Georgie, you're going to dive into this too. If you had a chance to read Jacqueline's Meet a Farmer feature, she's a modern day shepherdess living in the rural Midwest. And Jacqueline, you've dedicated your life to regenerating not only our planetary soils, but also our ranching practices and the livelihoods of rural communities. So through your work as founder of Central Grazing Company, I really, really appreciate and am honored to be in just reciprocity with you in your vision to create a food system that's based on regenerative circular economies and really return some of that health and vitality to the rural heartland. And Georgie, I think that you know this in ways that I can't even fully imagine. But as a 4th generation, 20+ year farmer yourself, based north of Seattle, Washington, you're versed in almost all aspects of farming and food production. And she's been writing on this for years, y'all. So we're so blessed to have Georgie in the writer circle with us. And I think it's just going to be truly spectacular to hear you guys in conversation today. So before we kind of jump in, I just wanted to share a video, in case you guys missed it, of Jacqueline's work. And I will share my screen and we can kind of set the space. And then Georgie, feel free to jump in immediately afterwards and can kick things off.
Right.
Awesome.
Jacqueline, and a regenerative food system is one that takes into account the whole entire ecosystem, from the microbes in the soil to the winged predator, and it also pays attention to the community. I'm Jacqueline, and I am a shepherdess and a mother. My family and I grow lambs for Central Grazing Company, but we also work with other farmers in the Great Plains and the Midwest. I started Central Grazing Company in 2015 as a way to help get animals out of the feedlot system into a more natural food line for people. We are currently helping to kind of elevate, especially rural communities in the Midwest and the Great Plains, where we've seen this huge exodus of people leaving this area for other opportunities because of the collapse of the agricultural system. What we do here on our farm, we rotate our sheep every 24 hours. We build these temporary movable fences that we keep our sheep in. We come out here every day and just pick up the fence and move it to another location. It helps us reduce the predator impact on our flock. It also helps keep the parasite population down in my flock, and then it protects the soil. So we allow the roots to grow really long root systems and that can tap down into the groundwater and to become stronger above ground too. The plants have long resting periods in between the grazing cycles. We try to achieve about a 60 to 90 day rest on the pasture before we put our sheep back on it. That is the philosophy of mimicking how the Great Plains evolved through great herds of herbivores that once roamed these areas. When we have ourselves connected individually to the land and to each other and to our community, it makes this really powerful connection to our food system, which is opportunities for rural communities to kind of grow and become the agrarian culture that founded the United States. I'm Jacqueline, and I am a shepherdess and a mother.
All right, I'll go ahead and take over. All right, Tori? Okay. Hey, Jacqueline, it's so good to see you again. And I just wanted to start off by just saying I'm so pleased to share this story and your insights with the Farmers Footprint community. I know when we first talked about a year ago now, I remember at that point I was so impressed with what you're doing, but I really wanted an opportunity to tell more of a larger piece of your story, since that was a very narrow conversation we had at that time. But so I was so pleased to be able to feature you through Farmers Footprint. You know, and especially because as a farmer in the Midwest, you know, I farmed on the West Coast, and the West Coast growers, we tend to get a lot of press and publicity, which is great for us. But the farmers in the Midwest, you know, your struggles are often one that don't tend to get the attention and interest that we tend to see focused on the farmers on the coast. So I think, you know, going into the heart of the country where so much of our agriculture happens is really important to tell those stories. But I wanted to sort of highlight the main arc of your story for the audience and sort of just fill in sort of, you know, how you got to from point A to XYZ, and then you can jump in and fill in anything I might have missed. So Jacqueline is a Midwest native. She grew up not too far from where she farms today. She did not grow up in a farming family. So that was sort of a little bit unusual when she decided she wanted to go into farming, especially in the Midwest. It's hard, anybody trying to enter in farming these days, it's a tough journey. So, but she knew that she always had a real connection to animals and the environment, and was very passionate about, knew that she wanted to get into food production and you know, how do we responsibly grow for our communities. So she went off to explore that, went to the Peace Corps, learned a lot there, came back and started her first farming business as raising sheep for sheep's milk. And that business really took off. You took on regenerative practices there, reclaiming some really tired soil, and really built this business up, and also helped a lot of other farmers in the area also start their own sheep dairies. And by the way, if anybody that's going into farming, dairy is like one of the hardest areas to go into. There's so many regulations on dairy, but so that's just impressive from a farmer's background. But so started the sheep dairy, that took off. But in the meantime, as she realized that there was all these lambs that they were being produced, other sheep that that really had no good outlet for where do we send these lambs? How do we honor their lives and include them in the regenerative process? So, and also, meanwhile, they had all these other dairies that were sort of in the same situation with their lambs. So that was another opportunity for Jacqueline. So she sold out on the dairy business and started Central Grazing in 2015. And the purpose of that business is to raise lambs. They direct market sell them. And they also use all the products, working on developing a new sideline to their business using lamb leather, which I think is really cool. And then also offering that opportunity to other farmers in the area that she works on. She lives in the Midwest. So that creates, a great opportunity for other farmers to be able to expand their businesses, to be able to diversify their practices and step away from just monoculture type agriculture and add animals in. So I think that's sort of my big memory of your story. Do you want to jump in with anything I might have missed there, Jacqueline? And if not, we'll jump into some specific questions.
Well, first of all, I'm extremely impressed by your ability to tell that story so well and almost on target for the timeline. But yeah, I am just briefly, I didn't know that farming could be a career choice, even though I'm from the Midwest and farming has been always around me, and my culture really is embedded into farming communities. I didn't grow up on a farm community. And so when I decided to go into farming, it was a pretty large transition in my family internally. So it's not a career choice that people look at as being the typical successful career choice. And it has a lot of tremendous struggles that other industries don't have. And so I can't say that my parents were necessarily not proud of me choosing this, but it was difficult for them to accept that this was the choice that I'm making for myself.
Yeah.
I like to joke that was nearly almost 25 years ago, and they finally have accepted it.
Yeah.
This is what it is.
That's great. Well, yeah, no, I totally understand. I came from a family of farmers, and they were still thought I was, crazy when I decided to farm. But it's not an easy area to go, especially if you don't have a history, a family background of it, and land. Frankly, that's a big problem. But I wanted to talk about one of the things that I thought was so interesting when I spoke with you, because you are from an agricultural background, is you sort of had a different perspective on the business side of farming, which I thought was super fascinating the first time we talked. And what really struck me was, well, I want to bring this up for a couple of reasons. One is because I think there can be a disconnect between the farmers, especially new farmers, and consumers, about how we structure food production in the ideal way we would like to see, like regenerative and humane and all these goals we really want to focus on. But how we structure, how we're able to make those choices, but also have a profitable business. And a lot of farmers I know go into farming because they're really idealistic about it, and which is fantastic, because it honestly takes that mindset to stay with it, but without understanding the financial part of it. And that can be really tough. And also, I don't think consumers always understand the financial part of it. And even when we do see consumers these days, or investors for that matter, which I would really love for you to speak to, using their dollars to support better food production practices, oftentimes that money is rarely going to the farmer in the meaningful way. So it's either going to, the manufacturers, the processors in between, or, investors are investing in sort of concepts, but they're not actually investing in farmers or farmers' land, frankly. And that's a super big challenge. And I know we talked about this sort of about how it's almost like, how do we change this basic idea of capitalism and our food supply chain, which is so intertied of everything should be more efficient and cheaper, but then yet it comes with those negative consequences of bad for environment, and bad for the animals. So how do we change that And what sort of shift would you like to see as far as consumers, our government, investors, as far as they interact with supporting regenerative farmers like yourself? What would be your like pie in the sky? Like, what would you like to see happening there?
That is a very big question.
I know, right? Let's jump into the big one, right?
Yes, I mean, I love how you just slide right in with like the toughest one to answer.
I know, right?
But yeah, it's true. I mean, I through my career, I got into farming from the perspective being that idealistic young person wanting to live off the land. And at the time, I think, you know, we talked about my philosophical beliefs about using animal products at the time. And I was coming from a standpoint that I didn't have the capability internally or the insight internally or the knowledge of how to fix the system that was really disgusting to me. So the only recourse I had was to boycott the animal industry. And after reading and becoming passionate and really looking at it from a very deep from an interpersonal landscape, I realized that the power for that change is within me, right? And what I could do was work towards creating a better life that I wanted. And that was to find ways that incorporated the use of animal products in our food system like nature has given us, and in a way that is respectful to everybody involved. It's hard. I mean, like, we're sitting here at this perspective now where, you know, I've grown my career on that very small level. Like, we started businesses that were tiny, that started at the farmer's market level and moved up. And we started with nothing. When we started the dairy, we had no land, we had nothing. And we started to acquire those, the places where we actually turned row crop farming back into permanent pasture land, which was a whole experience in itself. And at the time, you know, we started farming. It took us 8 years from the time that we started farming to the time we sold our first piece of cheese, because that was how long that learning curve was. And that's pretty intense. Like, during 8 years, you're not making any money. Thankfully, it was a time in my life where I could literally live off dirt, because that's what I had to do. And thankfully, the farm that we purchased had a housing system on it, so I could live out there pretty relatively cheap. You know, now being in my 40s, my expectations for quality of life have changed, but they're still pretty simple. You know, I talk to my colleagues out in the field all the time. I was just in Iowa visiting some farmers, and the consensus is that, like, we all want to just sit on our porches drinking lemonade, right? That's what we want. That's how we want to spend our time. And we are in a system that doesn't even allow us that simplicity of life because of the scarcity that we are in. And we don't ask for much as farmers, but we demand to be paid a living wage that's not in poverty, and that doesn't exist in the system that we have now. You know, I'm growing and scaling my business from a small to medium tier business. It will never be in a large business at all. I'm not going to sell it to that kind of corporation system because of how vital this structure is for my farmers. And I look at my work as really being an advocate for not only the soil, but the community enrichment. And like, you know, I spoke with you about how, you know, I am in my 40s, and my generation, I watched my generation leave in the West. The opportunities dried up. There wasn't anywhere for anyone to do anything for anyone to do, and they left. And we all know where they went, right? They didn't stay here. And with them left all the opportunities that goes with them. And so now we're sitting here kind of in this desert of opportunity, lack of opportunities, where it's really affecting how people cope with daily life and the amount of mental illness that exists in the farming community. I mean, there's studies that are showing that farmers have the highest rate of suicide of increasing than any other professions right now, because we're trapped in the system that has been designed over the last 40 years through policy changes and through local legislation that has caused us to either get big or get out. And what that has really done is dried up the infrastructure systems that we rely on to help process raw commodities into a sellable product. You know, we can raise all the animal proteins that we want in a very healthy way, but if we don't have the resources or grow grain, heirloom grain, all the lands that we have in a very regenerative way, but we don't have the infrastructure there to help us process these things, and we don't have a viable economy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, when we talk about the infrastructure for people that, maybe aren't in agriculture, that means very simple things like the auctions that you would take your animals to, or there's been a lot of tension since COVID, and the current administration is actually putting money into this. We'll see where it goes, but into rebuilding, reopening regional meat slaughterhouses, places, because there's no place to take your animals anymore. And so, it all became decentralized, like and so that means that, for a farmer that's just we have the problem here, like, just if you're just raising a few animals, even for your own family, you can't get a date to try and get your animals, slaughtered and processed. It's impossible. You have to be much bigger. And so that means there's those lack of regional jobs, like you were saying. It just all trickles down. The other thing I wanted to have you expand on, that I thought in our very first conversation before the Farmer's Footprint story, you said something that really struck with me, and it was talking about investment, because that story was about investing in regenerative ag and how hard it is to find investors that want to invest, like, in a farm business that's focused on, like, this isn't like have a really great high return. And the return you were talking about, the return is in, building the soil health and building these community jobs, but not necessarily in this. You're not going to be seeing a high profit back in your, in your checking account. But you also made a comment that really stuck with me, and that is that, farmers have been asked to take all the risks for all this time. It's time that the community, whether that's the consumers or the investors, take on some of, start taking on the farmers' risk for them, because we can't expect farmers to take on this risk. So I'd love to hear you speak a little bit about your work trying to get investors, because I know that was a big part of it, and you still do that.
I mean, that is another really sticky conversation, because like, I'm working in a lot in the investment world, like what I do to, when you get to a certain level in your growth, you need to start looking for outside investment dollars in order to scale. This is, farmers can't take it to the bank. We just can't take it to the bank. It just doesn't work. The FSA works on some level for some things, but then it doesn't for other things. Like, it's not it's not a catch-all for everything. So there's this whole other arm that's needed. And
there's no services that basically fund, like, soil health. There's no like,
or farmers that are, so there's nothing there that does it. There's no vehicle that does that. And we are being asked to take on, they're called money vehicles. They're different programs that you can deploy money down to investment or investee. So these money vehicles are designed mostly for venture capitalists with a high return. And they're looking for really a good project that shows profitability very quickly, that can get them a really high return on their investment and be a lot of money. Because, when we're talking about like $250,000, that sounds like a lot of money to us, right? When you're growing a business at a certain scale, you're looking for investments, and some of these investors won't even talk to you unless you're talking in the millions. And I'm like, farmers don't need that. We don't need that. We need this other thing that doesn't exist. And like, just like there's no middle tier infrastructure systems in the Midwest, or really nationally, there's also no middle tier investment vehicles that help get it down to the soil. There's a lot of greenwashing going on with investments in the agricultural, especially the regenerative movement. I'm starting to see it. I'm starting to see different funds that come into play. And funds are, I mean, I can get really technical here. I don't know how technical I can get, but funds are, they can be all pretty and shiny about regenerative agriculture, but then when you get down to it, it's just another venture capitalist trying to like make a return on their investment. And they're very inflexible. And when you're dealing with nature, like, nature works because of diversity. That's the only way it works. And when we're trying to apply financial capital to healing the soil, that really helps mitigate some of the problems that we're in, from population exodus to soil health to climate change. You can't look at it as this one size fits all. And just recently I heard about this fund that's going out, and it makes me so very angry because it's really a beautiful, when you look at it, it looks like a beautiful fund, but they're charging farmers 8%.
Yeah.
8% when they might be getting 16% on their margin. And it's crushing. It's crushing.
Yeah. And it all comes down to this, like, we have this capitalistic society and we all want to, it's all like, well, I'm not going to invest unless I think I can make a good return. Yeah. No, I know. I had some of the same experiences, even with my farm, with my family, with like needing to get some financing to help, and they didn't want to, finance me unless it could, be more than the rate they were making at the stock market. Well, that wasn't really going to work for me. I needed like 2 to 3% interest, not 8 actually.
Not 8, right.
Yeah. And I think it's an interesting conversation for both farmers and consumers and investors to really take to heart and think about, because I don't know, when you look at agriculture, there's a lot of things that we do in other industries that we try to apply to agriculture, whether it's, trying to get, this whole idea of getting really big and, and efficiencies and blah, 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 that came out of the factory industry. And now with financing and investment, and we just need to create a different model and think about it from a different perspective. And you were the first person that ever said that, ever like really pointed that out to me. Like, why are we trying, it doesn't work for farmers. I was like,
doesn't work.
You're right. Yeah.
Doesn't work.
Well, no wonder why I was beating my head against it for a long time, but I should have realized it just didn't work.
It's not you. It's
no,
not you that's messed up.
Yeah, exactly.
You're doing everything right. You are looking at the soil, you're taking care of your animals, you're trying to build a system in a system that doesn't want you to succeed.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
the financing is really difficult to get that way.
Mm-hmm.
So
right. So I wanted to you sort of touched on it, but I really wanted to, I'm jumping into all the tough topics here because, just go right for it. You touched on it a little bit, but I really want to get into it a little bit more because you had so many, I think, really wonderful things to say that I couldn't even add in the story because it was so great. But on the topic of animal production, and obviously to eat meat, to not eat meat is a hot topic in society today. And you really have an interesting perspective, I think, because like you said, you came from it with this, like you were a vegetarian for about 15 years, I think, wasn't it? Yep. Vegetarian for about 15 years because you didn't, you were so horrified by the system, didn't want to buy into that. But then, you realize that to make those, to change the system, you had to participate in the system, so to speak. But you also had some really great things to say, which I thought was really interesting about, it isn't so much, it's either the meat eaters against the vegetarians or the vegans. It's not like the vegetarians, that's an important choice towards changing the system as well, just as much as ethically, choosing to eat ethically raised meat. And I thought that was a really great way to honor the whole debate, especially because it seems like these two sides are so often at odds. So I would love to hear you speak to that a little bit and about your experience with that, because I thought it was really powerful.
Yeah, it's a very meaningful one for me. It is the catalyst for why I'm a farmer now.
Yeah,
it's that conversation. And I became a vegetarian. I was for about 3 years of that. 15 years I was pretty much a vegan. I didn't wear any animal products. I did not participate. I was really against all of that movement. In fact, I started selling meat before I started eating it.
Wow.
It's kind of funny that happened. But yeah, the moment for me was just this realization that the life that I'm providing for my animal is even better than sometimes, and I don't want to start a debate here, but this is my anecdotal perspective on my life and what I've seen through working with nature is that when I've watched other things eat my sheep like coyotes or attack my chickens like minks, I know that the way that I am processing their lives is a much quicker and painless relative to that experience. And so when I witnessed how nature consumes itself consumes itself, right? That's how nature evolves. Everything is eaten and everything eats and everything gets eaten. That's just the way that nature works. So when we start removing some of those things from the ecosystem, then it starts to become unbalanced. When we have imbalanced ecosystems, then we really start damaging habitats for animals that we really, really need. When we're talking about this conversation, this polarizing conversation about do you eat meat or do you not eat meat, and it's this personal choice. You know, farmers, most of us who are doing this work, look at the entire ecosystem from the microbe in the soil to the winged predator. And every single function of that ecosystem is really important for the balance of what they're doing. And so we gauge our success of our farming practices by looking at the species returning. We're looking at the winged birds coming back. We're looking for the rodents on the ground. We're looking for the insects that are crawling through the pasture. We're looking at the species of grasses that are growing, and we're looking at different flowers that might be not palatable for our sheep, like, you know, milkweed, butterfly milkweed. When we start to see that on our pasture, we love that, even though it's not a nutritious plant for my sheep. It brings all these other wealth of beauties to like the world. And so when we're really talking about eating meat or not eating meat, I understand that conflict so well because I was there, right? And I knew that there's very limited choices for someone who has a consciousness about the animal life. And it's very difficult to break away and find farmers who are raising meat in a way that you understand and appreciate and can honor. Versus just going out to supermarket and buying whatever is on the shelf, not knowing where it comes from, which is 95% of what's out there in the shelf is so you don't know where it's coming from or how it was raised. And because it's processed mostly in these big processing plants that are owned by, I mean, like 80% of all the infrastructure in farming is owned by 4 companies, and 2 of them are out of country, like Brazil and China. Like they own half of our processing. Like there's no regulations on, like we can't control that, right? We can't control our food system. So I completely understand that dilemma, and I honor that dilemma because it takes a diversity of people to make change and movement. And just because we have 2 different ways of looking at the perspectives of the world in this doesn't mean that we're wrong, because we both have the same desire to make sure that we're living in a world that's more peaceful. We all want to drink lemonade on a porch, right? That's all what we all want to do.
That's right. And have time to, you know, enjoy and appreciate your life while, you know, you're here on planet Earth.
For this short time.
And I really appreciate your comments to, you know, as far as diversity. And that's something I think that I see a lot and that I get frustrated with when I see it's very much like, well, you know, the vegetarians or vegans are bad because of this, but the meat lovers are bad because of that. And we seem to be put everybody in these boxes without realizing we are, at the heart of it, you know, our goals are the same. And I think it's quite interesting. And I know I have had a lot of experience with raising and you know, and processing my own livestock on my own farm, whether it was turkeys or chickens or rabbits. And oftentimes one of the experiences I had that was interesting is I would talk to people I knew, because I'd be buying, like at the grocery store, and be buying spice. They'd say, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm processing turkeys," you know, and they'd be like, "No." They were like, "I could never do that." And I'd say, "Well," they'd just be horrified. And then they'd say, "Well, do you eat turkey?" And they'd like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "But how can you like just buy turkey? How can you buy meat at the grocery store and never think about how it's processed?" I mean, to me,
it was raised.
How it's raised and how it's, that to me was more horrifying. They said,
time on this earth.
But they would tell, "We just don't want to think about it." And I was like, well, I don't know. I'm not, I'm not there. So no, I think that I really appreciate like your comments and your perspective on that. Coming from there, I think it's really powerful and something for us all to be thinking about when we think about, you know, our choices when it comes to what we eat on a daily basis. Tori, do you want to open up questions, or I have a few more we could ask, or are there questions from the audience we want to go into now, or?
Yeah, I'd love to invite everyone. I saw one raised hand earlier, and maybe we'll give it just a few seconds to see if anyone's intrigued by that offer and raises their hand. If not, Georgie, we can keep riffing.
Sure. No worries. We'll see if anybody jumps in.
We got a Matt. Okay, amazing. Hey Matt, what's going on? Thanks so much. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's good to, thanks for kicking us off. That is brave. We really appreciate it. Dive in.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to jump back to is the conversation around investment. And, you know, I grew up in a Midwest farm, but have been doing kind of DC startup land for the last decade. And so I'm really curious, from her perspective, Jacqueline, like what would be the ideal investment vehicle for you? Like, is it equity, debt? Like what are kind of some of the details around that you've been thinking about? And then is anyone offering that? Like, I know, you know, a lot of people mentioned Meta Agriculture with their perennial fund. But just kind of curious, like if you found anyone doing that or if that needs to be created and doesn't exist at all yet for you and farmers like you.
So I have taken a really strong stance against certain type of money, and like that doesn't fit for what I need to do, and makes it difficult sometimes to have conversations with people who are not aligned with me, because I feel I'm going to be idealistic here, right? But I feel like I'm in battle right now to like work fast and work hard to try to solve some of these problems so that the generation behind me can step into this place and take over. Like that's what I'm doing, right? I'm standing on shoulders of giants, and I am a giant that someone's going to stand on my shoulders, and I'm paving that way for them. So I have to be very careful about the money issue, because there's lots of things that are tied to money. And I have thankfully been able to network through very secure sources to find other people who have the same vision that I have for restoration of soil and community support and health. And at every stage of someone's business, there's different vehicles for money that are appropriate for that stage of growth. We're still early stage, so we are easy to find angel investors. And there will be a time when we're going to have to talk more at the fund level, the larger fund level, and we will be at a different stage of that time. And the conversations will be more appropriate, but they'll still be heavily weighted against what is the best thing for the soil. So every time that we take an investment of money, that's the question we ask. Is this good for the soil? And if the terms match what the soil can do and perform, then the person who's giving it has dedicated and has shown dedicated desire to really be in this with me, meaning that they understand that it's not a typical investment, that it takes time to rotate, that it takes time to give, to elevate other farmers, to prop them up, to be able to have the resources to scale with us too, as we're starting to aggregate from other places in the United States. And I think for small businesses, you know, crowdsourcing funding is really nice for farmers to have. And then you get to this another stage where you're like still very early, still in the seed stage, that PRIs or MRIs or donor advised funds are a good way to deploy capital fast, because it's in between this philanthropic perspective and investment perspective. So there's a return, but it's a slow return, and the terms usually consist with how long it takes for soil to heal. Those have worked really, really well. And so stacking some of those kinds of investments together to create a larger capital pool is the perspective that we're taking at this moment to get us to that elevated place where we can talk at a greater depth with some of these other funds that may or may not have the resources that we need to do this work.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. That was really, really well said. And I like how you brought in a diversity of vehicles that are optionable, and also the farmers' different stages of growth. I think that's such a fascinating piece.
Yeah, it's all about blended capital. I mean, you can't, it's diversity. Like you can't come back to this diversity. You got to have it. Everything in a farming business has to be diversified. And so does the money vehicles too. So looking for creative sources and looking for people who are willing to have those conversations about what kind of creative sources can we get down to the soil and how fast can we deploy it. And really farmers need a lot of money in small doses. They don't need big chunks of money. They don't need millions of dollars, but like, you know, someone needs $1 million that's deployed over like 4 or 5 different farms. That could do a lot of good work.
Really well said. Matt, do you feel complete on that? Yeah, maybe a thumbs up. Feel good? Okay, sweet. Awesome. We're going to pass the mic to Henrik.
Okay, hello. I would like to ask a question about these neighbors who are not sitting on the porch but would like to. If you could try to get into their mind, what is it that is keeping them from following your path? Because presuming that what looks down the road in front of them, more of the same, doesn't make much sense. And here's somebody else who is doing something different, and it seems like it's working. What is keeping them from joining your path of doing something different? I know the easy answer is making money, right? But there must be something deeper than that. I think in the beginning you said in your case, you started focusing, okay, the answer is here inside. What is keeping them from reaching that same level, or what's your perception of what's happening in their heads?
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this question, actually. What is that spark that gets people to change, right? Like, what is that driver that causes the ripple tide that we can start being like mirrors and examples for all those people who are around us? And when I look at the farming community, like, it just resonates really deeply with me that there is this scarcity culture that exists in the farming community. When we don't have access to like vital things that keep our quality of life somewhat pleasant. I'm not even talking about good, I'm just talking about pleasant. It really creates a scarcity culture where it does come down to market. And when you are up against this hard place and you have to sell a commodity, and there's only one place to sell that commodity, and that commodity market is going to nickel and dime you all the way, you have no more resources than to go out and create a marketing campaign to elevate yourself out of that. You have to be able to see the vision and have the concept of sufficiency, of living in sufficiency in order to get to that plane, right? And how do we get this, right? It does start with the inner work as an individual, and that individual can pass it along to their neighbors and their friends and their brothers and sisters, and you grow a movement, right? That's how movements spread. And so like I have had the good fortune of having some ideas and having some passion that has helped drive this conversation so that I can get into those other places and start finding who are the radical thinkers within my network. So we farm, but Central Grazing Company also buys lamb from other farmers in Kansas, Iowa, Oklahoma, and Missouri. And we spend a long time looking for those radical thinkers. And I don't have another word for them, but they've got to be radical, right? They've got to be the cutting edge, the people who are looking at their systems, who come like saying like, I'm ready. Like I see something here. And I know that this way that I've been growing up on this multi-generational farm isn't working. I can see how it's put all these people in bankruptcy. I know I'm on the verge of that myself, and I need to radically rethink this. Those people who are taking those risks, we want to support those people indefinitely, right? So when I look at Central Grazing Company as a tool to liberate this, right? Like we have the tool is the market that we've created and we carved out, and that is scalable and that we can grow. We look for those radical thinkers within the communities. We deploy them with the technical resources, the business resources, and even the inventory that they need to like grow their own population of sheep for us, and then we purchase it. And then those farmers who are stakeholders in the community spread that goodness and love throughout their community. And that's kind of how we're looking at it. So when we have those conversations with the farmers, the ones we bring deeper into the folds of our conversation with Central Grazing Company, those are the ones who have the ability within their communities to reach the commission, the county commission, who reaches the state level, who starts convincing their neighbors that there's another way to do it. And their neighbor starts talking to us. And the next thing we know, we've got 3 farmers in one community, and then we're building the infrastructure there. And then someone's taking leadership, and like it's starting to like trickle down into this like really grassroots campaign to decentralize the food system. And lamb is one way to do it, but this is an open market. So anyone who's interested in like getting into farming, the middle tier infrastructure system is the way to do it at this moment because it needs to be built. And there will be lots of investment opportunities as we start to see these things being built.
Okay, if I can just follow up, would it be fair to say then that when you started out, you had found some sort of support or community, or you had some kind of reason to believe that this would go well, and those neighbors who are still reluctant don't see that that's possible? Or
I think two things happened. One, I'm not from a farming background, right? So I don't have that baggage, a farmer baggage that can be really hard for a fourth, fifth, sixth generation farmer to get out of, right? I didn't have that. Secondly is like I did come from a motivation perspective that this is a calling for me, right? Like this is my calling to do this work. And those two combinations have let me kind of be outside of the traditional culture of farming to be able to see how to utilize the tools of capitalism to support a new market, essentially.
So well said. It's really fascinating to me, Jacqueline, like the unique circumstances and how they created the conditions for you to kind of like enter through the side door into this space and what you've created because of that exact, you know, the conditions that kind of set up your ability to navigate within it. So thanks for breaking that down. I think that's something that we play with a lot. And Henrik, thanks for bringing attention to that question of, you know, how do we tease out what are the conditions, what are the thought processes, what's the community support look like for both sides of the spectrum, everything in between, and all of the things that we don't even know are on that spectrum, whether it's conventional to regenerative. You know, it's not about the labels that we're calling it. I think there's so many attitudes and beliefs that underset a lot of how people behave and navigate in the world that end up moving them towards being viewed a certain way. So I think that's really cool to tease that piece out. And thank you for speaking to your experience there. Appreciate it. Cool. John has a question for you. And John, I just asked you to unmute. Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Jacqueline. I'm wanting, am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you, John.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I just want to sort of shift the mood a bit. I'm just to let you know, I'm from a relatively small city in the southwest of the UK, Bristol. So what I think I'm trying to kind of ask is your relationship with the people who buy and eat the beautiful stuff that you produce, and just the extent to which you've had relationships. I mean, right down to sort of face-to-face relationships, you know, kind of human relationships, you know, with your, I guess, customers, because I feel that there's something very significant about that part of the conversation, in that I'm talking, as I say, from within inside a city. And one of the things that's going on for us here is trying to just expand a bit the sort of awareness of people in the city to exactly this, or certain aspects anyway, of this conversation. In other words, what it actually takes in the way of the life that's led and lived by people who produce food, meat or vegetables. There's lots and lots and lots of people who love the food and go on about the food, but that doesn't mean to say they have any terrific interest in the people who are producing it. And so there's a disconnect. And I feel that that relationship really does, is at the core of expanding the take-up of regenerative food, knowing the people who are producing it. I just wondered, really, all I'm asking is what, if any, sort of stories or experiences have, you know, I'm sure you could talk for ages about that.
Well, Definitely. I definitely have a very close connection with the people who are producing the food that we buy, and then obviously my own story. But this is like storytellers like Georgie is the way that it gets done, right? Like we can't do, farmers who market themselves are asked to do everything from grease tractors to write business plans and know how to navigate the investment world. I don't know of another profession that requires that much multitasking as farmers do. And so there's not very many people in the world who can do that, period. And then the farming community, storytelling on top of that is just like, yeah, we can't do that. We can't do it all. And we're not really good storytellers. Our lives are rich and beautiful, and we're really connected to the soil and to the land and the creatures that we partner with in the fields, but we can't tell that story. And so it's been good to be part of something like this, to be able to get the story out, because they are very well and in depth. But I also just want to say, and I don't know if you were thinking this or not, but I have a really strong boundary with people who don't understand how important it is to fix our broken food system. They're not the time. I'm not here to try to educate people to change. I'm not here to convince someone that my way of life is the right way. What I'm here to do is to do the service that I have been doing, and to give it, make it available for the people who understand the value of what we're doing. And that comes true to the customers that I work with, to the investors I talk to with, the storytellers, all of it. Like I cannot use my time to try to convince people to understand what it is like to be a farmer. So I got my head down most of the time, working away.
And that makes sense. Yeah, I think that's a huge piece of this too. It's like, how do you stick true to what you're doing, and how much further and faster can you do that when you're not always kind of spreading your energy around trying to convince others that what you're doing is a good thing for you. So very wise in that. I love it. Derek, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
I am live. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Hey, Jacqueline. Hey, everybody. Georgie. I appreciate your words. It is radical. This world is a diverse world in that we had a chance to run the industrial way, right? We had a chance to do that. They said, let's do this, right? And they actually thwarted a lot of farmers back then. But as a result of that activity, this is where we are. So the radical approach that you're saying, a lot of folks are there with you, Jacqueline and Georgie, and all of us that are here. It is time. It is absolutely time. And I agree with you on the diversity front, because the soil is in one of the most diverse structures on this planet, right? And here we are. We've tried to cultivate out, no, you can't play with us, only this can play with us. We've tried to limit diversity, and as a result, again, we are where we are. So I hear you, Jacqueline, so thank you to that. My question to you is, were you able to get into the local bankers in your county, for example? Like, I was thinking that the local banks would be more supportive of your fundings as a funding source, being local. You know what I mean? You know, that local thing. You know, did you have any issues with that?
Yes. Yes, I had issues. Yes, I had issues with that. Because all agricultural local banks base everything on the commodity market. And when you're a self-marketer, you don't price anything on the commodity market. You price it on the market that you're building. And so when you take a business plan into a banker that is so different than what they're used to pricing out deals, they won't take it. It's too risky for them, no matter what. So I have worked with local banks on FSA partnerships for land, but that's the extent of that.
Awesome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I really appreciate this. As Tori knows, and everyone who knows me, all of these feedback, all of this information is validating that we have got to act like we have to save our planet, which is going to ultimately save us. So I'm with you, and so let's go. We got to get it done, y'all.
We got to get it done.
Yep. Adios.
So good, Derek. Thank you. And Anthony has a question as well.
All right, thanks, Jacqueline. So you talked a lot about sort of the ecosystem, right, from all the way starting at the soil, and you mentioned really briefly predators and predator pressure. And maybe it's just a smaller question on that. Well, so I'm in Colorado right now, and I just came from Wisconsin. If you're paying attention to headlines, both of those states have been in the news for wolves and the reintroduction and management of populations. One of the things that always comes up is the taking of livestock by wolves. And so I'm just curious to hear, how big of a deal is predator pressure from wolves and wild animals like that? And then maybe a little commentary on at what point does that predator pressure start to have truly adverse effects on you and your farm, and like how much do you at what point, I guess, how does your ecosystem view and your view of kind of regenerating that ecosystem play into how much protection you give your livestock?
Yeah, so I'm speaking from a point of not having wolves, so it's a whole different thing that I don't have any experience in. So I can only speak to the predators that we have, and there are a few. The most well-known is coyotes, for sure. They can do quite a lot of damage to a flock very quickly. If coyotes are well fed, they will just come in and take livers from the animals, and that's really difficult to see. And they can do a lot of animals in a very short amount of time doing that. We also have bobcats and things of that nature here too that are not as, they're still rare, but we do have them. And whenever I think about ecosystem, especially involving predators in farming, I never let my guard down. When I let my guard down, that's when an attack happens. So first of all, I have to make sure that our protocols for protecting the sheep are always in play. And we have a couple things that we do. We moving them every 24 hours inside electric fence helps break out that predator-prey relationship because it confuses the coyotes easily. And then I also have dogs, and I have 5 dogs that work with my sheep, and all of the coyotes in my area have relationships with those dogs, and they interact in a very specific way with them, and knowing which set of dogs work best for what part of the farm that has the heaviest coyote population, or because coyotes, they never stay in one place, they move, but they move within seasons. They don't, like from season to season, they don't move within a season very often unless their habitat has been destroyed. But the thing about it, when you're looking at the ecosystem, and if you're having a tremendous amount of predatory problems, and there's something imbalanced in the ecosystem, that's what that means. And it's not something that we can necessarily fix quickly, but over time you can fix that imbalance. So for instance, when we look at coyotes as also being a protector of our sheep too, because there is a worm, there's a parasite that lives inside deer that is expelled by deer around especially bales of hay, that if the sheep eat it, it's called meningeal worm, that they will cause them to become paralyzed and then they can't function. The coyotes help keep that parasite down in my sheep so we don't have that problem. So we look at them from 2 different perspectives of like how are they interacting with the animals? How do we keep them safe, keeping our guards up, and also understanding that they're a very important role in our ecosystem.
Amazing. Awesome. Anthony, you feel good?
Yeah, I'm curious if I could ask a follow-up. If you think of the ecosystem as your farm, or if you're also thinking about an ecosystem imbalance outside your farm and how you may or may not be able to address that.
Yeah, I look at my ecosystem on my farm, and then I look at the ecosystem in which my farm interacts with other farms. And then I look at how Central Grazing Company interacts with my community, and how Central Grazing Company acts within our stakeholders in the communities and the United States as large. So we have multiple different levels of ecosystems that we work within. And each of those have built this whole circular structure so that it all feeds back down to like, how does it support the soil? And it's very, I mean, it's an intricate way to look at every parts that we touch. But again, the centralized question here is, how does this affect the soil? And that's the question that we propose for all of those circles of ecosystems that we look in, from money to soil to farming to whatever. But on a very localized level, yes, what my farm ecosystem is, how my farm ecosystem has changed over the time that I've been a steward of that land, and recognizing the different species that are coming back as a safe place, because we're providing the habitats for those creatures to live there, those creatures and those plants to live there. And I know that when my infrastructure or my ecosystem and my farm is elevated, so are those of my communities too, right?
Yeah, beautifully said. I think it's interesting to take that really macro view and hold that intention with what you were talking about earlier of like, I have to be focused on what I'm doing and not worry about kind of what's going on outside of that. So to be able to really have two hands and hold both of those is quite a juggling act, along with everything else that goes along with being a farmer. So appreciate you having that perspective, Jacqueline. Okay, we have one more question, and then I have two final questions for you. So I think we're just about good. And Matt had a second question around, can we scale up the number of regenerative farmers through the aligned investment that exists today? And how do we find or align more for each stage of a growing regenerative venture?
That is such a question that I don't have the expertise to answer. I mean, that is a really intense question. I think about that question, like, what is it? How do we get, there's a lot of money in the world. How do we get that to the soil, right? Like, there's plenty of money. There's plenty of money that everyone should have healthy food, right? I mean, it's ridiculous how much money is in the world. And the fact that we struggle so much to like find it for very essential things that keep all humanity alive. Like, we have really misaligned value systems around money if it's not going to the thing that keeps us healthy as humans. But I don't know. I struggle a lot with, how do investors find us, right? How do we find people doing this work? And as far as I know, there's no database on this. There's very few conversations that's really highlighting who's in a capital raise, who's trying to scale, who has this vision to make a new market for a niche product that has scalable parts to it. I don't know how that works. What I do know is that through central grapes, one of the questions I ask my investors when they come in is like, do you have the stomach to invest in my farmers? You know, like, you're helping Central Grazing Company create the market. Now, do you also want to filter cash through Central Grazing Company to the people on the ground level who need it? And that's a vehicle to like get that relationship started on a different level too. And so when we're talking about being in 5 different states, we have 5 different communities in 4 different states, we have the capability of getting money to these people that otherwise wouldn't be known. So if anyone wants to work in that capacity, please be in touch with me. I would be happy to share more insights, but there's someone needs to do that work.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me, because I think that work happens a fair amount in, you know, the for-profit and nonprofit space of almost like a funneling action. So if you're, you know, a central point of attention or focus, and then you can expand that out to the network of producers or growers or stakeholders in your community. Yeah, where are more of those, you know, internodal points of intersection that people can start to, you know, insert whatever leverage that they have into it. That's really beautiful that you're doing that on the ground work and supporting your communities in that way. Love it. Awesome, gang. Well, I have, Jacqueline, just a question that there's 2 questions I love to wrap with. And the first one that I'm really curious about, and you've spoken a lot to things that, you know, have been really inspiring to you in your journey. And also there's things that you still grapple with and you're struggling with. And that is probably where every single person on this Zoom call is in some capacity in their professional or personal or relational, you know, work in this life. So my question to you is, and it's okay if there's not a salient answer beyond just follow along and like stay in tune. But how can this community support you? Like, do you have a short list of needs that you really are leaning on in this moment in time?
Yep.
Easy.
Yes. I mean, our most immediate needs, we're looking down a tunnel of some major scale over the next few years. And we're building our team. We need some people who can help us build our D2C platform. We're looking for a seasoned COO. We're looking for people who understand like the farming community to help us build the farmer profiles to like be able to make this skill happen. So if you guys have insight of people who would like to join in this radical movement from that perspective, please, we are building our team, and they need to be highly qualified to be able to do this work that we're doing, because it's hard work.
Amazing. I love that. Keep us in the loop, as you know, if that's a quiet thing rumbling from network to network, if we can help, you know, put the word out in that sense, really happy to. And I'm glad you put it out here as well, in case, you know, the community can work its magic in the sense of someone that they know. It's amazing. And I also loved how quickly you were like, yeah, duh, I have needs.
Yes, I have lots of needs. That's just part of it. There's lots of needs here.
This is the tip of the iceberg. Amazing. So the very last question is, you know, I like this one. I kind of modified it a bit from like a Tim Ferriss podcast. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the group, or one, you know, final message that you'd like to imprint on everyone here today, and everyone who will, you know, likely be able to take part in some of the conversations that happened later as they walk away from this session? Like, if you're going to put a short thing on a billboard, or just had one sentence that you wanted to just be like, if you walk away from this conversation and this is the only thing you remember, it is.
I would say start with yourself. Start with the work with yourself.
Potent and simple. I so appreciate it. Georgie, did you have any final closing up thoughts?
No, well, I think that was great. I think that Jacqueline sort of, you know, I know Henrique was asking, like, how do we get these other farmers to come on board with this and make these changes? And I think Jacqueline's story, she's sort of an early adopter, you know, and we have, you know, many early adopters there that we're starting. The farmers we're featuring through Farmers Footprint are all basically early adopters, right? And agriculture and farming, because of that level of scarcity that Jacqueline talks about, farmers tend to be highly what they call risk averse or resistant to change. And that's, again, because of all these things we talked about. They're the ones that take all the risk. You know, they don't have a financial partner that says, oh yeah, sure, you know, if you happen to invest in doing all this cover cropping and you lose your shirt for the next 5 years, it's okay. I'll help you pay your, you know, mortgage during the meantime. They don't really have access to that. And so that means farmers are risk averse, and farmers also tend to really, they make changes in their decisions about practices by seeing what their other farmers do, not necessarily what somebody at some professor or some university discovered or comes and tries to tell them. Lots of people try and tell farmers what to do, but farmers make changes based on what they see their neighbors doing and what other farmers and their peers are doing. So I think that's why what Jacqueline's doing is incredibly powerful, because she is providing both an opportunity for them that is a financial vehicle, that is an opportunity by saying, hey, I'll buy your lamb. I mean, that's just a very basic, like direct, like opportunity for them to make changes. And then she shows them that she's doing it and how to do it. She isn't just somebody that's coming with a little, you know, like a spreadsheet saying, well, if you were to sell me your lamb, blah, blah, blah. She's like, no, I'm also doing this, and here's how we're doing it. And so I think that's very powerful. And that's how we make change. I think that's how farmers change. And you know, as non-farmers, supporting, you know, these opportunities to buy these products when you can, and then finding these financial vehicles. I know there are a few out there, like Mad Ag is trying to do some more things, and Replant Capital, a few, but they're just barely starting. So there's so much more need for that. So that's, I guess, what I would add to the whole conversation at the end.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful, you guys. Yeah, and Kate, thanks for tossing that link in there for those who aren't familiar with the Perennial Fund.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been such a pleasure. Jacqueline, thank you so very much for your time. It's really impactful to have your voice here in this circle, and to share kind of some of that deep wisdom that, you know, this is a beautiful kind of like medium to understand some of the inner workings of how you're approaching regeneration and rural communities and supply chains. And I think the finance and investment side too is something that really sparks people up. So thank you so much. And Georgie as well, thank you so much for co-stewarding this conversation. It's really beautiful and always a gift to have it.
And I'm really honored that you want to tell my story. So thank you. It's necessary, and I'm so happy about that. Thank you.
I love telling farmer stories. That's what I do.
It's so good, guys. Awesome. Well, we're going to pop up Jacqueline's info in a second. And then just in the meantime, we're hosting events like this in Farmer's Footprint on a regular basis. And I just wanted to also draw attention to one of our community members, Henrique, who is here today. He's hosting a 2-part community conversation series starting next Tuesday. So you guys have some links to that. And I really bring that up because, Jacqueline, it just trends so well with what you're talking about. Start with yourself. And then how do we start to work together from there by leading by example? So that'll be a big give and ask reciprocity moment. And then Kate, if we could toggle over to Jacqueline's work, definitely keep an eye out on what she has going on as far as upcoming positions and opportunities. And probably one of the best ways, I'm assuming, Jacqueline, to stay informed about those things is by following along with you on social and, staying up to date on your website. So again, just huge gratitude. These events always make me just feel all warm and fuzzy inside. And I hope you guys leave with a little spring in your step as we send you back off into the wild. So thank you all so much. And for those of you who would like to stick around for just an extra 15 minutes, we've all been to webinars and then, feel so inspired or have so many more questions or curiosities and then go off into the ether and then get the replay and send it to one friend or family member. So we're doing a community roundtable immediately after this. So if you guys want to stick around, we can just kind of all come off mute, kind of switch those Zoom power dynamics and hear a little bit from each of you and start to unearth and embed some of that deep wisdom or curiosity that lives hopefully in each of you, which is amazing. So with that, we can kind of wrap it up. And Jacqueline, again, thank you so much. Georgie, thank you so much. Back into the wild we go. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Gorgeous. So good. All right, well, if we still have a few folks sticking around, we can switch these Zoom settings, allow people to unmute themselves. Let's see. Henry, can you unmute yourself? You want to be a guinea pig for me? Still can't. Oh, it's so annoying. I hate when it does this. Okay, let's see if we can unmute everyone. Okay, I just asked everyone to unmute. Let's see if that works. Now we got it. Gorgeous. Awesome. Well, this space is really just for us. And I think, whoever sticks around, maybe there's definitely a reason for it. So I'd be really curious to hear if there was anything that, struck you from that conversation or invited you to get a little introspective or curious or left you with some questions. And we can kind of dive in together.
What struck me is that setting a really tough barrier for whom you want to work with and whom you want to allow to finance, that's an attitude quite unusual, right? And what struck me is that it's actually working. She definitely has some talent, obviously, for making it work. It would be really interesting in digging into that. That's what really surprised me. Instead of being on the low, accepting and begging, no, you are lucky if you want to work with me, right? That changes the whole dynamics in a conversation, right? So maybe we need more of that.
Yeah, I definitely second that. I think it's really important to have that sort of dynamic, but it also creates the challenge of how do you find enough investors when it's such a small percentage actually are a good fit. So yeah, I'd be really curious to hear if other people have ideas around how do we do that, because that's something I would like to help solve.
But wasn't it you, Jody, who said that? I mean, how do they find us? right? Isn't that the problem? Because there are banks out there, big banks who want to do something good in the world, and you know, like they said, there was so much money in the world, but how do we know? How do we connect?
Yeah, and to give you a little background of how I actually met Jacqueline was I did a piece on Jacqueline went through what is it called, a cohort, right, that helped with her business, and that company helps a lot of similar type regenerative small scale farmers or business, you know, ideas get started, and get their business plans together, try and find investors, blah blah blah. And I did a piece with them talking about the need for more investors and how they needed people, these investors that were coming into regenerative ag or just food production in general, because there's a huge movement right now with putting investment money into farming, agriculture, food, right? There's all this money going into like all these ag tech startups. I write a lot in that area too. But their point was they need to have, there's like an education that needs to happen for these investors, that they need to realize that, especially when it comes to agriculture, the timeframes are longer, like things aren't going to happen as fast. You're gonna, like if you're a farmer that's trying to change a practice and you have an idea, it takes a year. Like you might, implement that practice. You're going to see the results in a year, and then you're going to say, okay, this worked and this wouldn't. Let's define, let's refine it. Blah blah blah. It might be 6 or 7 years before you get to anything that you think is viable or scalable, right? So, so that was one thing. Like, how do we get these investors to understand there's a much longer time frame on return, and that the returns just aren't going to be. They need to understand returns, at least with how the way our food supply chain works now and how we pay for food. The returns aren't going to be as high as you're getting out of some of these other sectors, like tech. And that sort of thing. And so there was a big education element trying to go on, where they're talking to these ESG investors and saying, okay, you really are passionate about food. You say you are. You say you're passionate about the environment. Okay, let's talk the reality, what that means. Like, in all this money that you built on all these extractive, ideas of wealth building, now you need to, that needs to be put back. Yeah, we I mean, if you think about it, all the wealth was built by extracting resources, right? And now we're in the situation where we're going, well, shit, now we're getting resources are becoming limited. Where'd they all go? Well, you know what? All those people that built their wealth on resource extraction, they need to rethink about that. They have a responsibility to it. So there's it's just like a huge mental shift. And again, what Jacqueline's, when she said that to me, that was the first time I'd ever heard somebody say, no, farmers shouldn't have to put all the risk out there themselves. They should have investors to take on that risk, because I never thought in my own farm to go out and find somebody okay, can you help me? Can you invest in this, we do that sort of small farmers do that through CSAs, I suppose, but that's really the only vehicle for smaller farmers to really find an investor that takes on the risk. But you just don't even think about doing it. So it was really fascinating to me when she had that perspective, and it helps to have somebody changing the mindset of well, yeah, to say no, these people need to come work with me. They need to, it shouldn't be me begging for money. They should be begging to work with me. Yeah.
Now, I can put a few perspectives from Denmark, and what's the main driver there are the pension funds, right? Everybody is putting their money into pensions, and they need to invest that money somewhere.
Yeah.
And this is the interesting part, because if you're a consumer and you are asked, would you like more organic? Would you like to help the climate? Everybody says yes, right?
Yeah.
There's a difference when they're down in the shopping mall, right? Maybe when they need to pay. But these big pension funds are setting off a certain percentage of their investments, trying to do something good, specifically for climate, environment,
Yeah.
but they are also looking for buying land, you know, and we're not talking small quantities. It's huge. It's really, really big. And that's where the gap is for me, because you have all of these small farmers who are wanting to do this, okay? And then you have these big corporations, pension funds, and for them to have a trouble with one little farmer who needs maybe $100,000, that's not worth the trouble.
Yeah.
If we could get these small farmers, because if you have to look from the mind of that manager of that pension fund, what's he concerned about? Okay, I give $100,000 to a what's, you know, is there anybody who can help me so I don't need to be drowned in checking up that this is not just money running away, you know? Finding the right candidates, getting organized as these small farmers. If you were presenting as farmers footprint community farmers, then this organization could talk to that pension fund and kind of like be somebody who could give a certificate of whatever, that Matt is actually a good guy, you know, Derek, he's a good guy, and everybody that has some, you know, facilitate the flow of money. Because if you're that big, it's too much trouble to get involved with one by one.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because I've heard a few farmers talk about specifically with like, not necessarily incremental investment, but with land transferring, that never hits the market. So those are happening in local communities, like among local communities. And there's not, you know, billboard signs or listings on any platforms really that I know of that are really aiming to do that and decentralize it. And I think there's also pieces of this that, same as what has been said so much, it's like, how do you understand culture and understand the belief systems that like underset it? Because I think for farmers, there's a lack of trust. Maybe they've been burned so many times by bigger, larger conglomerates. So there could be some hesitancy, and it makes more sense to them to go with their neighbor's brother who they trust, who wants to own their land when they're ready to, you know, figure that piece of it out. And probably the same, like I would imagine some farmers, you know, go more like friends and family round. I don't know that for sure. I'm sure potentially a blend, like what Jacqueline was saying, but where is the trusted partner that can like be bridging some of these gaps between large and small, and like also be a translator among the cultural pieces that, you know, underpin both of those, not different ends of the spectrum, but just like different points in the circle of what all the players are in this space.
No. Well, at the bottom, at the end of the day, the problem is there's no like financial value. I mean, there should be, but there's no financial value associated with soil health. And, you know, that's not like, and so, you know, that creates a giant problem, right? Like you're building soil health, but there isn't a dollar figure that, you know, I mean, ideally one would say, okay, well, you're going to get better crops, blah, 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 but how do we quantify that? And so that's a problem. And it's the sort of the merging of the capitalism versus nature, you know, you know, doesn't really, they don't mesh all that great a lot of the time, you know, so.
That's what I was thinking about. I'd love to get folks' thoughts on carbon credit. I'm with Organic Consumer Association, and my boss, Ronnie Cummins, is really excited about the work that Hudson Carbon is doing on carbon offsets. And he said this is really the legitimate kind of carbon credit, and not just a way for large corporations to pay for their sins, continue polluting. And so, you know, that this would be a way of transferring billions of dollars. But what, you know, I think the whole concept of carbon credit is confusing to the average consumer, even the consumer that's really passionate about the climate crisis. What do folks think about carbon credits and the what my boss is terming carbon offsets to differentiate from carbon credit?
Could talk to you all day about that. I mean, I think the short version is like, I mean, offsets in general are basically junk, and like you can talk to Carbon 180, you can talk to like friends I have kind of all different aspects of this, but most of it is still greenwashing. And until we get to something that's a lot higher quality credits that aren't $10 a ton, but you know, $100 a ton, that actually take into account
that's
everything that goes into it. Like it's so I think we're in the early stages, and I would like to see that transition over time, but right now it's not there.
Okay, yeah, Hudson Carbon's talking at least $50 with a goal of $100 a ton. They are doing continual monitoring of different areas of a farm, real-time reporting at different depths in the soil day to day. They're doing this for the first time at their farm in New York. We're looking at possibly replicating this around the Tucson area, but it's, you know, it's like I'm just afraid that the concept is poisoned already as corporate greenwashing. And anyway, I think it could be doable, and so I just wanted to get folks' thoughts on that. So thanks.
No, I think for me, I think about it from the farming perspective, and different types of soil. I mean, just first of all, there's so much controversy, like you were saying, what level are we what level are we measuring it, blah, blah, blah. There's still so much research going on as far as what it actually means. But different types of soil have a different capacity to be able to sequester carbon. And so it's from a farming perspective, it's sort of, and also depending on what type of farming you're doing has the ability to sequester more carbon versus others. If you're in a region where they get more rain, you have a much higher capacity to be able to sequester a lot more carbon faster. But that doesn't mean that the farmers that are in an area that don't have that opportunity shouldn't be encouraged to sequester what carbon they can and improve their practices. And so sometimes that's why I think like the farmers get a little irritated about it in that perspective, because we need to me it's like you need everybody contributing, whether their particular farm or climate or whatever can be a smaller percentage sequestration versus another one. It doesn't really matter because we need it all, right?
Yeah.
And it has so much greater impacts than just, yes, obviously carbon, but we know we're in climate change already, and whether maybe we can stop it, we're still going to be experiencing more. So that, water is a huge thing now, like whether we're talking drought or flooding, and we know whether, if you use regenerative practices, you improve your soil's ability to retain and absorb water. And that's, that isn't necessarily, computed when we're talking about carbon sequestration, So I don't know. So it's a difficult thing. It's so hard to put little boxes and check marks around anything when it has to do with natural systems, because they're so diverse. So I don't know. I go back and forth on it. Like, it seems like, well, great. At least it's something that a farmer could maybe get a little more out of, but then it also doesn't seem like it really honors what we should be encouraging.
I think something to add, just a smidgen. I know we're at about time, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. But just to say, adding on to what you're saying, Georgie, because I think it aligns really well, that Medium article that I put into the chat gave me some interesting nuances on this space, Patrick, if you want to take a look at that. And building off of what you just said, Georgie, but also what we ended up talking about earlier with just spreading risk, further like reducing the risk that's on farmers and putting it on people on both sides of the vertical supply chain around them. One thing that I've heard, and to my understanding around carbon credits, is basically the farmer gets paid once and then brokers just get paid again and again and again. So it's like, what systems are we setting up? Who are we really trying to benefit? And is there a place for that? And I think, like Georgie, you said, there's pros and cons to all things involved, but it is really tricky when there's so much going on in this space to quickly get educated on all of the nuances. So I actually really appreciate circles like this and conversations. Like Matt, seems like you've done a fair amount of like rabbit holing around this area. And I think that's one of the best ways to learn the nuances is do a little more reading and then reach out to someone that you know that knows a lot about it and have a more in-depth conversation. So appreciate you bringing it up. I think that's a really powerful point, Patrick.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to sidetrack it, but it's such an enormous potential pool of money, but it's so confusing. I just wanted to get folks on it.
Yeah, no, it's perfect timing, as always. So again, guys, thanks so much. I hope this was useful and looking forward to seeing everyone in future live events where we can get sidetracked and have some fun together. So really, thanks so much, gang. Have a great rest of your
Thank you.
Thursday.
It was a great conversation.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.